Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today we are going to be having an introduction to Node.js and Express backend development. This is going to be a series of videos that will walk you through how to build a backend server using Node.js and Express. Now, before we go into the technical aspect, I would like us to have some foundational understanding of what the backend is. Now imagine that we have an online bookshop where users can go view a list of books, add some books to their cart, check out and make payment for those books, and probably even add their home address for delivery. That is what a typical online bookshop would look like. Now, for the users to be able to access this bookshop, they need a device like a phone or a laptop. Now, when the user goes to their browser and types the URL of the bookstore, let's say www.bookshop.com, and they get to the website's landing page, what the user sees is the front end of the application, because there are so many things that are powering that application. There is the front end, which is what the user sees. That's where the user sees the home page of the website, the about page of the website, the frequently asked questions page, the login page, the register page. All these things are handled on the front end side of the application. This front end part of the application is built using three tools: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. JavaScript is the programming language we use to manage functionality on our website. So when the user visits the website and logs into their account, they probably see their username at the top of the page, maybe the nav bar of the page. How do they get this information on their page? How is it different from what every other user sees? This is what makes each user experience unique, and this is backed up by something else that is not on the front end. All that information is gotten from something called the database of the application, and this is where we store information such as books, users, orders, checkout information, and all that. And each of these items, which in this case we'll call objects, have their own properties. So a book has a name, an author, a price, maybe a published date, and so on and so forth. This information lives on the database, and we need a way to communicate to the database from the front end so that we'll be able to decide which user should see what, which user is able to log in on the platform, which user is able to register on the platform. Now, we can't do that directly from the front end to the back end. We can actually, but it's not advisable. It's not best practices. It's not a good idea at all, because once you start handling all this logic on the front end, you are exposing your website to a lot of vulnerabilities. So it's better to do this on a place where people do not have easy access to, and that is where we have the server of our application, also called the backend of the application. It handles all the logic on our website, almost all the logic, especially the ones that has to do with authentication, managing data, and all that. That is handled on the backend or on the server of the application. Now, the backend has its own URL, which sometimes can look like the URL of the front end, but there will always be something that makes it different, like having API as part of the URL. This URL has its own endpoints. Just like on the front end, you have different paths that leads to different pages of the website. You have the /fac, /about, /shop, /home, and all that. On the back end, you also have endpoints this time around that handles all the different groups of logic that a user requires. So there's the /users endpoint, which probably handles the logic of getting user information from the database. Now, on this backend, we also need to do some coding, and the programming languages we use on the front end is different from the ones we use on the backend. So some people use programming languages like Python, Java. Like there are so many backend programming languages that cannot be used on the front end. But then there's a provision for you to write front end programming language, which in this case is JavaScript, on the backend. And that is where we have the Node environment. The same way you have the browser environment where JavaScript is run, that same way on the backend you have the Node environment where JavaScript is run. So the good thing is, like, if you're already a front-end developer or you already know how to write JavaScript, for you to code in Node, you don't need to go and start learning a different backend programming language. You can just write your JavaScript code on the Node environment, okay? So this backend slash server part of our application is what we are going to be learning how to build in this tutorial. So the first thing we'll be installing is Node. So you have to download the version that is recommended for most users. That's this one. Try to avoid the latest features because sometimes they are not stable. So download this one. And if you want to find out if you already have Node installed, just in case you are not aware, just visit your terminal and type Node-v. So if you see something like this signifies that you have Node.js installed. So this is the version of the Node.js. You can see that it's the same version with what we have currently on the website. If you see an error message here instead, then it means that you don't have Node.js installed. So go ahead and click on this button to install it. The next application we'll be installing is Postman. We are going to be using Postman to test our server APIs and be sure that everything is working as expected. So you come down to this button. When you go to postman.com, you come down to this area and select your device to download. Then after that, we'll also be downloading the VS Code. Now, VS Code is a code editor where we'll be writing our code, running our code, doing a lot of things. You can actually write your code in your terminal, the same place you have Node.js installed. I mean, the same place we checked for Node.js. So you just type in Node, press enter, and it says welcome to Node.js. Then you can start writing your code. For instance, you can say var age equal to 32. You press enter, then when you say console.log age, it returns 32 for you. So this is very valid Node.js environment for you to write and run your JavaScript code. But we are not going to be doing this as we are building a server. We are going to be making use of VS Code. So click on the download button. When you finish downloading all this application, you make sure that they are properly installed and you can run all of them. So you can come down to your launchpad. You should be able to see your VS Code, your Postman. The Node.js will not show up here, so don't worry about it. So just ensure that you have your VS Code and your Postman. So we click on Visual Studio Code. Now it's going to show you this welcome window. What you'll be seeing here may be different from what we are seeing currently. It doesn't matter. So up here, you are going to have the opportunity to create a new file, open a file or folder, clone a Git repository. We are going to be working with open. But before we do that, let's just come to our desktop. Let me just minimize this and this as well. So we'll come to our desktop or wherever you wish to create your application and create a new folder, and we're going to call this Node, or let's just call it the name of our application, say Book Rush. Okay, so we're going to be opening this from Node.js, and we click on the open, go to desktop, and then we click on Book Rush and select it to open. It's gonna ask you, do you trust the author of this file? Yes, because of course I'm the author. Okay, so we'll close the welcome page. This is an empty folder. There is nothing we have here now. You can either use the terminal. If you go up to the menu, click on terminal and select new terminal. It will open up a new terminal for you. So we're going to close this part of the terminal. So now we'll be creating our first file where we'll be writing our JavaScript code. Now there are different ways to do this. You can use VS Code features like this icon here, that once you hover over it, you see new file. You can click on it and create a new file, or you can do it from the terminal. Doing it from the terminal is actually not writing JavaScript. It's shell scripting language. So you have to do something like touch and then the name of the file index.js. Now, if you're using Windows, I don't think touch will work for you. There's a different command you have to use. So I'm just going to use this for now. Every other file I'll be creating, I'll be using the VS Code provided features to create the file. So I'm just going to do this for now. Touch index.js. You'll notice that there's a new file here in our folder. And if you go to the desktop where you created this folder and you open it now, you'll find that there's the new file index.js in it. So to open the file, just click on it, and here you can start writing your JavaScript code. Now, in order to run the code in this file, I'll just come back to the terminal, write the node command, and then I enter the name of the file I want to run. So we'll be using node to run the index.js file. So you see what is printed on the console, which is red. I'm going to be deleting what we have here, and we are going to be setting up our Node.js server. Convert this file and every other thing in this folder to a server. We have to run npm init, which would help us set it up. Let me take this up. So npm says this utility will walk you through creating a package.json file, blah 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 blah. It's asking you what's the package name. Yes, we want to retain the name BookRush version 1.0. Description, if you want to add something. You're just going to see different things popping up and asking you to fill in whatever you want, and you can leave everything blank and just keep pressing enter until the very end. Now we notice on the left hand side here, in addition to our index.js file, we have a new file now called the package.json file. When you click on it, you're going to see most of the setup you did down here. When we run npm init, we're going to see them here: the name, version, description, main. Main means the main file where your backend server will be running from, and that's the index.js file. That's the tongue twister. The next thing we're going to be doing is to install Express. So if we go back here and we click express.js and we select the express.js.com. So we'll copy the npm install express-save and enter it in our terminal. And press enter. It should be installing. Now that it's done installing, we see a new folder on our application, which is called Node Modules. Now this folder is where all the third-party libraries and packages that you use for your application will be stored. Everything you find in your package.json dependencies, you are going to find them in your Node Modules. So we are going to be picking up the Express which we just installed from the Node Modules. For you to do that, we are going to say const express equal to require, and we enter the name of the library or the framework as a string. Then we are going to define our application. We'll say const app equal to, and we'll call express. So we'll say app.listen. Here we have a definition of the listen method. It says listening for connection. Okay. Now the listen method takes two arguments. It takes a port number and any other thing we want to run after the app has started. So in this case, we'll be using port 4000, and then we'll add a callback function to say what we want to do once our application starts running. And for now, we'll just say console.log, and then we'll enter a string app running on port 4000. So we just come to the terminal and run node index.js. So we see that it's running on port 4000. Now this is the browser port, so we can go to the browser and enter localhost/4000. And now we have a message that says cannot get /. And that is because we've not started defining our API endpoints. Remember the API endpoints we talked about, we've not started defining it. So the first thing we want to do is to create this GET request. So we want to be able to tell what our application will do once a user hits the / part. So we'll come here after the app dot, after the line where we created our application, we'll say app.get. Now there are different types of requests, HTTP request method. There's GET, there's POST. I'm just going to mention them up here. So there's the GET, the POST, the PUT, the patch, and the delete. We'll be handling most, if not all of them, on this tutorial. So here we say app.get, and the first thing we want to say is the path or the endpoint. So this is /, which is like the entrance point. Then we also specify a callback function. Now this callback function takes two parameters, the request and the response, the HTTP request and the HTTP response parameters. So we have request. I'm just going to type it out in full. We have response. This is 1E, please. And now we'll say response.send. So this is how we specify what will happen when somebody visits localhost 4000 / or even without the / is still the same thing. So we'll specify it here and say response.send. And we are going to be sending, there are different types of things you can send, but for now we'll just say welcome to Bookrush, which is the name of our application. And we'll come down here and restart our server. We need to restart our server because right now the server is running with the old state that it had. So it doesn't have this code that we just wrote here. It has not been updated. So for us to do that, we have to restart the application. And then we'll come back here and refresh the page. It says welcome to Bookrush. This is perfect. So we have our first endpoint here. Now there are other things you can also add or send along with the response. You can also send a status code. So we'll say response.status, and then we'll specify 200, which means like a successful response. 200 means okay. So this is the status code, and this is still very fine.